What guidelines do you follow when we strive for energy efficiency in buildings, from initially conceptualizing to the completion of a project? Starting with Sonia. Sonia, we would like to have your view.
I would talk around the context of the field of business that I come from, a background of commercial office interior. So some of the basic guidelines that when we design offices for various clients, right from the site selection stage to thereafter to design and then to delivery, there are certain key practical aspects that we look into. Simple things like when you're selecting the location of your building, you would select a site which is in closer proximity to, say, a public transport, which has easy access to workforce from their from their homes, etc. So closer proximity, immediate neighborhoods, something that is centrally located so people don't have to travel far and wide to reach their workspace. um, when it comes to building design and the master planning by itself, it has to have a responsive design in place, which basically means that the whatever you design, the orientation of the building has to take into nature as an account for designing the building by itself. Um, we also look at when we suggest buildings to our clients, we look at buildings that are already existing. We do an assessment of the life cycle of various components of the building to analyze if they can be reused or something that can be refurbished, so that we don't waste a lot of energy in constructing an altogether new building. Rather, we would refurbish an existing building to the new requirements of the client. um, Design by itself, both exteriors and interiors, is designed in such a way that it's very flexible. So tomorrow, if day and time, if demographics change, business requirements change, you can easily retrofit by means of doing minor changes. And also that begins to even thinking much ahead of time on the growth strategy and all of that, so that you build a flexible work environment that is responsive to not just the environment, but also to the growing needs and demands of the industry that the client is in. Um, of course, there are other things like once we have the insides of the building being done, we are talking about any energy efficient solutions for your cooling systems, your lighting systems. We have automations in place which are programmable to the to the level of the end user, which then makes the building running costs and also the operational costs very efficient in the longer run. So there are various technologies that we implement on ground to kind of make this happen. That's a very detailed topic, and I think we'll need another webinar to discuss all of that. But yes, uh, a lot of emphasis on bringing in a lot of automation, so that that kind of makes everything very, very user specific and user centric. Um, yeah, so these are the few things that I would look at, um, at the first hand to kind of design a building for
Thank you,
commercial.
Sonia. Thank you for sharing your insights. Deepa, would you like to add what Sonia has just said?
Yes, so I echo a lot of what Sonia already said. Those are all best practices. For context, I'd like to also add, like, um, in an architecture firm, we have like 70 million square feet of work happening at a time, and which is all at different stages, right? And so when we look at guidelines, even in the concept, there are some stages in the concept itself. So there is a pre-concept, then there is a concept, and then there is, you develop the concept, and then there is schematic and so on. So early on, we look at, when you're sketching, you don't have details on a project, right? You're just understanding how to respond to the program which is given to you in terms of, the square feet, the plot, the context, and all of that. So at that level, we look at all the basic things like, your form, the orientation, with respect to what's immediately outside the, your plot, which is given. In Mumbai, there is a huge space constraint. So what can you do given that reality? So we also have a sense of, is there good light and ventilation in the residential units given the high density that you have to plan for. So this is as basic as it gets. So this is what we take care of at, like a pre-concept and a concept stage. As you move a little bit further, but still being in the concept stage, if there is a clear guideline from the client for any kind of sustainability goals, it could be a rating, it could be something very specific like I want PV on the roof, it could be any of that nature, then from there on we try and respond to that. So then it becomes very specific to what is the ask on the project. But when there is no ask, we make sure that we are always thinking about all the the 3-4 things that I said, the most basic things on site, and that's what happens in practice on a day-to-day basis.
Deepa, for sharing such interesting facts with us. Sanjeevni, we would like to have your inputs.
Hi, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. As Deepa and as Sonia were just saying, the main thing when we start any project as on a concept stage, okay, from the concept, the basic thing, the first thing is the orientation, wherein how the building is going to be orienting, how it is going to be sited on the site, on the plot. Okay, the game starts from that point. It actually it's just a difference of an angle or so. It immediately changes the complete effect of the whole heat ingress and all those scientific terms that we come across then. But yes, now I'll tell you one more thing. We in looking at our urban planning, okay, the plot comes to us. We are not choosing a plot or we are not choosing a site per se. Sometimes the client already has a site. Sometimes they already have that a rectangular plot probably is elongated east and yeah, it is having a longer side facing the east and the west. Then comes a problem. Then the orientation, everything goes for a toss. Then how do we respond? How do we design a building to that particular response? Is to give a better uh, climate response structure or a form to the building, shading it, minimizing the east and west facades. All these things then start coming out. So even before the client comes in with a brief, okay, now I come from a healthcare background, so I kind of know what exactly is there in the mind of of the client, of the doctor basically. So aligning the buildings, where the entry of the patient is going to be, where the service entry is going to be, where all these things. If when you start playing around with these pockets and these points, probably all these things are defining the building on a on a much different level. And then the climate responsiveness is probably taken care into, or taken heed to. So there it becomes a slightly a different game here. But yeah, but we try to as much as have uh, the climate part of it to be incorporated into our in our design part, as as having more open plans, having more open courtyards, trying to bring, because now when a patient is there, then the relative is accompanying that patient, for example. What happens is this relative gets anxious and then simply tensed around. And so that kind of relief and that kind of break that is required is it can be designed, can be a part of the design, by creating small openings, open spaces, healing gardens, courtyards, small nooks where there is greenery, where there is a proper shading, they can actually go out. So all these things play a big role in the actual combination of interiors and exteriors.
Thank you, Sanjeevni, for explaining us with those examples. Sandhya, we would like to have your views too.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I think most of the points is covered by Sonia, Deepa, and Sanjeevni. But yeah, there is more or less a, you can say, a tried and tested process established for an energy efficient building design. And the most important aspect is the integrated design approach, wherein all the stakeholders collaborate right at the beginning of the project. It actually helps you to list down some project specific goals, sustainability goals or energy goals, and the benchmarks, and you have enough standards in the industry to support you, which help you to set up these goals. And obviously, as what the panelists said, that you move looking at the possibilities of harnessing passive design strategies, what the site has to offer, and then move on to efficient building design systems like your HVAC, smart lighting, all of that. And automation is, of course, an important aspect where it is the need of the hour today. However, I really strongly feel that there is some more aspects which we can look at. Is It's a change in thought process, as you have to look at a whole building system thinking. You move from isolated energy measures and adopt that how do all the systems interact, and you look at overall efficiency of the building design, so that will actually look at the entire building in holistically. And the other aspect which I feel is performance based metrics. Look at real time data, look at the goals you've set in, shift the focus from mere compliance to codes to performance based metrics. If you can look at all those aspects, that will give a more really defined approach to the entire thing. And lastly, very important, as Sonia also mentioned, is occupant engagement when you're designing, because they are the final people who are going to be using the spaces. So engaging strategy, educating them about these measures is a very important aspect. So these should be looked at in the tried and tested process of doing a energy efficient building design. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sandhya, for enlightening us with your insights. Nikita, could you please share your inputs?
Yeah, I guess most of the points are covered. But being an environmental architect, one thing which I realized that after my environmental architecture masters, I changed the perspective of starting a design. Like now we go from macro to micro. First, whenever we get a project, what we do is we see in what climate it lies, what kind of macro climate the whole city is having, and then slowly we come down to site and then analyze the site and then all the rest points that were covered with the previous panelists. So that is one important thing about the climate study. And also I would say that for new people like us who are entering into this field, these rating systems and all these codes like ECBC and all, they are also providing a good guideline, because somewhere they are quantifying all these things that we spoke in terms of design. So while operating the building, also while we are finalizing or finishing off the building, these rating systems or these code of conducts are giving us a good parameter to quantify whatever efforts are taken. So I guess, and rest of the points about design were covered by the panelists. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your inputs, Nikita. So, moving on to my next question, Sonia, could you provide us your insights on how do you navigate the evolving landscape of net zero and ESG goals in building design, and what role these goals play in shaping your design decisions?
When I talk about ESG in workplace in particular, of course, a lot of companies are committed to ESG principles lately, because the sheer thing of talent attraction for them to become more productive and profitable in the longer run. Um, of course, environmental goals through workplace design is directly related to um, what what the employees believe in, and uh, a study says that almost 60% of the employees believe that the employers should do more to address environmental issues such as um, implementing sustainable workplace design techniques, reducing carbon emissions, recycling construction waste while at the stage of construction, of course, using locally available materials, incorporating low VOC finishes in the workplace interiors. Um, Thus, what happens is when large organizations build multiple offices and their footprints are much larger, they also minimize the company's environmental impact when they look at the macro level. and this aligns with their organizational ESG objectives. Also, post construction, right? The day to day business operations, almost 28% is um, the carbon emission is attributed to the operations. So this can be interest by having simple practices in the workplace like recycling, upcycling, embracing technology that's shared by automation and what that I spoke earlier, smart office designs, energy efficient controls for HVAC and lighting systems, sun shading devices, simple things like planning of the workspace by itself, how responsive is it to the climate and the outdoors. Um, so that takes care of your environmental goals. Now, the social responsibility through thoughtful workplace design, it's a lot to do with talent attraction. Even studies have shown that a lot of the next millennials and the Gen Zs that are there in the industry right now, they look out for corporates that that consider social responsibility values as a part of their company ethos, and this can be translated directly to something like adaptable work environments, ergonomic furniture, promoting equity and diversity in the workplace, engaging office environments, implementing initiatives that prioritize employee health and well-being. So a lot of clients that I cater to, they all, right from the defining of the brief stage, they all talk about this language so that they cater to every aspect of what it comes between wellness and well-being of the employees. Um, Governance, of course, is something that talks about the um, ethical reputation, how transparent are your decision-making processes, which fosters like a positive work environment for people to reach out to colleagues and management in the organization, so that you build in trust, you build in collaboration, you build in the investor confidence. You also, thus, of course, the more collaboration you have, the more kind of better work you can do, and also increases your brand reputation. So these are the things that we look at when we're talking about ESG goals, and net zero is of course a different topic altogether, which I will not touch upon. But yes, these are the few things when we talk about ESG and how that translates into the actual office design that we do for various clients. Um, these are my few insights on that.
You, Sonia, for sharing your insights with us. Moving on to my next question, Sanjeevni, in your experience, what are the most common challenges architects face when incorporating energy efficient features into building designs, and how these challenges can be effectively addressed?
Okay. Coming again from I'll always take the example of a healthcare project here. So when you're designing a hospital or a small healthcare facility or whatever the range is, there are stakeholders. The major one is the patient, then then the caregiver, okay, the staff, basically the doctors. Okay, now this again is a non-medical and medical staff and all that. So all these people together come, and they function a hospital, or rather they operate a hospital. Now when you're doing a design for considering from our point of view, like our climatic or climate responsive point of view, again, when I told you sometime in the earlier this having certain, so along with the patient comes his relative, his attendant, somebody who is going to take care from his house or from his home. Okay, so even that person also needs that kind of relaxing atmosphere, or like a vibe, an environment where everybody is, because everybody is actually anxious and everybody needs that kind of comfort level that needs to be given. So climatically also that is possible, And by giving different, by planning properly, by giving different spaces, giving some private pods, or giving good niches, or all these things, when these things are integrated in the design, it becomes a really a complete design. But the challenge is sometimes is that, again, how to maximize. Now, when it comes to, so when developing a hospital, again, it is a real estate only that we are developing, right? So what happens is the client wants more beds. Okay, they want, there are so many other utilities, like you have all these things, DGs and transformer, and MG, the manifold gas pipelines, and all these things that come along with only the hospital. So apart from the hospital, there are many numerous things that are also there in the services, from the services point of view. So integrating this and the building is sometimes a challenge, where the plot size is small, when the client needs a lot of beds, or the requirement is more, where in fitting those requirements is, it becomes a challenge. Then there are certain norms, okay, like from the medical point of view, there are norms like NABH, that is our national accreditation board of for hospitals and healthcare and all that. So these norms, and there are international norms like JCA and all that. So looking at, so these norms also define internal spaces. You need to have that many corridors, all these things. So somewhere it becomes a challenge to sit the building on the site, uh, complying to all these norms, as well as having a better climatic response to that particular zone. Now, for example, we did one building in a hot and dry climate. It is in the central part of Gujarat. So, and there the client doesn't really, of course, he doesn't want to go for a very uh, you know um, big structure, or a glass structure, that we tried and convinced a lot. Okay, this being a very hot, and it's a hot and dry climate, we cannot go for a glass facade. We need to have something which is a double facade. We need something which will reduce our heat gains, and our planning will need to be in such a way that we are not orienting it towards the western and eastern facades. We are having it more on the northern. So all these things, when trying to explain it to the client, thankfully we have some clients which they are taking heed of our advice, and so it becomes a little easy there. But then, yeah, so sometimes it doesn't really work like that, because then the site is a problem. You can't really sometimes it doesn't really work. The climate responsiveness doesn't really work sometimes. But then there are other measures, like having elevational treatment, like having shading devices, having vertical shades, having horizontal shades, or having again, as I told you, double cavity walls. All these things then come into play, if we are not able to orient the building correctly, or rather site the building correctly. So in healthcare, basically, these are all the, apart from only having a climatic aspect to the building, or responsiveness to the building, all these other norms that are there, that also create a lot of too many things to be thought about before designing a hospital. It becomes a challenge, and it is interesting. Yeah.
Thank you, Sanjeevani, for answering that. That's very informative. Moving on to Sandhya, my next question. Can you enlighten us with the most compelling advantages of energy efficient building designs, both in terms of environmental sustainability and occupants' well being?
Yeah, so it's very well headed, you can say, environmental sustainability and occupant well-being. So when you look at environmental sustainability, we are aware that the building industry is contributing to a lot of carbon emissions. So climate mitigation is an important aspect in building design. So when you have energy efficient buildings, the structure significantly account to lower carbon footprints, and that's how you can contribute to the carbon emissions. So that aspect is a very important aspect, and that's designing energy efficient buildings is a need for our. The next one I would say is resource management or resource conservation. sustainable construction practices, the kind of sustainable materials which we use. All of these, if they are done in a right way, it minimizes the resource extraction and also the waste generation, and then it triggers this mindset of circular economy and the 3 R's, which eventually will help you or will contribute in reducing the environmental degradation. And the last and the most important thing I would say is resilience and adaptation. So when you have buildings which have been designed looking at the climate, looking at the surroundings, all these aspects which are there, so you are looking at buildings which are resilient against climate risk, or you can say um, you know uh, extreme weather events, or resource shortages, those kind of aspects. So your buildings are much more resilient to all of this. So that's an added advantage, because you're looking at the entire life cycle of a building. When a building comes up, its life cycle, as a thumb rule, is considered as 50 years. So you're looking at a 50 years planning right initially. So that's a great advantage I would look at. In terms of occupant well-being, I think energy efficient buildings looks at the indoor air quality, and as what the healthcare and workspaces, Sonia and Ines has marked out. It creates much better, healthier spaces, and that's increasing productivity and performance. So I'm sure whether you are at office or at home, you would like to be in a house or in an office which is day lit, where nicely lit, and you feel more comfortable in those aspects. There is also one aspect which actually in a longer run is very much important, that is affordability. It your operating costs come down. You may have an initial cost, but an operating cost comes down, so you are actually reducing your energy bills, and that's a very important aspect for any developer or a project proponent, or even the users who are using in a residential building. When you have an operating cost or an energy bills which are much reduced in an energy efficient build, I think that takes an upper edge to any kind of a design. So I feel these aspects are very important and compelling advantages which need to be highlighted to everyone. Thank you.
Totally agree with you, Sandhya. I mean, these are very basic facts that a person who is looking for a property would look forward to. Having
Sure.
a natural daylight, having cross ventilation, these are the basic things which an occupant looks for.
Right.
All right. Moving on to Nikita, my next question to you. How can architects effectively blur the boundaries between indoor and outdoor spaces to enhance energy efficiency while creating a cohesive and inviting environment?
Okay, so bringing about outside indoor, and this has been a very popular concept since my own first year. But lately, I've developed a new horizon to this. I would say that is efficiency in terms of resources, efficiency in terms of design, and also efficiency in terms of user. Like how much is user liking it? What kind of, because our generation is very much under the influence of Western even now. So it's high time that we realize that if we go back to our own deep rooted principles of design and understand our own architecture, it was always climate responsive and it was always inculcating the outside in. So it is important that we understand that whatever it is, maybe it is about bringing the glass facades, or it is about bringing the courtyards, the volumes of courtyard or the sizes of courtyard. All these things are already defined in our old architecture, which our generation needs to understand and inculcate in our design. And also I would say that it is not always that you just need to have a glass wall with a landscape outside and that would help you bring outside in. It could also be a space where, because you have design limitations, you have user limitations, you have budget limitations, so it could also be a space with a very minimal plantation, which is self-sustainable plantation, because in terms of landscape also maintenance is a major issue which cost the users. So it could be a self-sustainable landscape, and along with that you can have good kind of breeze, good kind of daylight, or the morning sun ray that you want. Even that should be considered as bringing outside inside the spaces. So it is time that we change our perspective about bringing glass facades and huge gardens and landscapes. But even small efforts in design can make a big difference. and making it passive can help us bring the outside climate in. Yeah.
Thank you, Nikita, for sharing your inputs. Deepa, moving on to you. Considering the budget constraints, what affordable yet effective design solutions can architects implement to make energy efficient buildings?
Budget constraint is always a hot topic. So I feel that whether it's affordable housing or a hospital or a five-star hotel, there's always budget constraint. So it's a myth to think that in an expensive project I'll have more bandwidth. No, it never happens. And to add to that, you always have time constraints, so which translates to cost as well. So these two things are always given. So it's not something unique that we find solutions because we are budget constrained. I think we always have that. Now, while that is a given, what can you do as architects, right? So I feel that from my experience, if I look back, right, the most innovative solutions have always come from constraints. If you had unlimited budget and miles and miles of land and they do whatever you want, I don't think it really lands in a very great outcome. But wherever there has been good constraints, you've always had some innovative thinking in the end. So first step is to realize that there are constraints, and that is actually going to help you be more creative. And architects always work with constraints. It is sometimes too much buildings to fit in a small plot of land. There is not much enough money. You have only 3 weeks to make these 5 options. There are all kinds of constraints, right? So when it comes to so any kind of solution, whether if it is cost effective, is going to come out of it. And your clients are there to ensure that it is cost effective, so you don't have to really worry much about that part, right? So I'm pretty sure the panelists agree with that part as well. If you put a spotlight on energy efficiency, I feel we are really limiting the problem. There is energy, there is water, there are qualitative things like livability, uh, right, a sense of space. All of these things are there. So when you have constraints, I feel what architects can practically do is try to focus on what are the top 3 things you can focus your energy on. You cannot probably do everything in a project unless there is some sort of a mandate coming from the client that I need you to do these 20 things. There is no two ways about it. Which also there are projects like that, but very, very few, like less than 1% probably of your portfolio is like that. But for the vast majority, I would say what architects can practically do is like focus on the most pressing thing in that context for that project. So it could be water for certain. If it's a hot arid place, then maybe your focus is all on water conservation and so on. The next thing one can do is use tools like the simulation tools very early on in the project, which help you compare different design options. So you are able to see the process or your design thinking in a little different way. And so these tools are helping you validate your intuitive thinking, and this is part of your sort of process. Again, putting all the constraints in, the solution will be something that will connect cost, design criteria, and environmental sustainability. So this is your second thing. You can include tools. And third is to architects are the first one who are hired on a project. Generally, every other consultants come later. So if you are on that table, the first person to be on the table, then if you recognize that there are these constraints, you can highlight it upfront. It takes no cost to do this. So you are aligning the entire team early on what are the potential opportunities and constraints for this project, and kind of align everybody on the same page. After that, the way you look at the building is not going to be like a value engineer option. It's going to be something everybody aligned on and happy with the outcome. So these things, I think architects can do irrespective of what project they work on.
Thank you, Deepa, for sharing your views on this. My next question is to Sonia. Now that we have discussed about cost effectiveness and budget constraints, I want to have your views on selecting building materials. What kind of building materials would help to optimize energy efficiency? So, what choices of materials can contribute to this overall architectural design to enhance or to support energy efficiency?
I would begin with, instead of looking at materials as the starting point, right, we have to look at um, the building by itself. I mean, the panelists have already covered on how we should plan it in such a way that it is responsive to the climatic conditions. Nikita also mentioned that it was ingrained in our culture that we had courtyards. We had a lot of these things which we are long forgotten. We are now coming up with glass boxes and trying to figure out what we should do out of those glass boxes so that they become efficient, energy efficient. But why not begin with right from the beginning? So when it, I do a lot of these campuses and I always see, uh, you know, buildings with multiple floors, glass facades, and of course we do the works, we do the automation, we do all sorts of things to make it function efficiently. But very seldom I have seen a lot of these campuses where we are climatic responsive, where HVAC systems are replaced by fans, you know, where lighting is replaced by harnessing natural light. So all this, of course, is a part of the planning and the design. But when it comes to materials, likewise, mud was used in the past for a lot of reasons, right? Because of its cooling effect. I'm sure now we cannot use it to the extent, but we can develop methods of construction that could use that in a way much more efficient way. We could use recycled steel, right? That's something that is kind of bringing in momentum right now because uh, research states that out of the 3 pounds of new steel that is produced is from old steel. So steel is something that we can be easily recycled in construction. So that kind of reduces our CO2 emissions. Um, Buildings by itself, using low E windows and glazing, using fenestrations that are responsive to the direction of light, horizontal, vertical building facades designed in such a way that you are having sun shading devices, etc., that are automated and change direction as the sun path moves in. Um, Responsiveness to the circadian rhythm of the end user, so that within the office environment also your lighting systems, etc., are designed in such a way that you are responsive to the various times of the day and the various usage patterns of the day, so that we also, when it comes to the actual materials, using natural materials which are available within the closer vicinity, uh, raw materials like stones, something that you can bring in from the local, thereby also having social cost to it, getting local artists and craftsmen to kind of customize certain things that can be used as furnishings and finished furniture, etc., within the office environment. Upcycling is a very common thing that we talk about nowadays. Furniture that is upcycled out of various types of existing, say, wood, or something that can be remodeled to form a new furniture piece, which itself is a statement, is coming in vogue, especially in the area of design that I am in. Um, uh, Even uh, a lot of other things, like we also use, uh, so to reduce the thermal effect of the building, we use a lot of sprays uh, that are sprayed on the underside of the slab, so that reduces the heat gain of the building, so thereby making the HVAC and the cooling system of the entire building more efficient. um, yeah, so there are innumerable materials that are available, I would say. And in addition to that, also the construction techniques, like, if you there are so many there is of course 3D printing, which takes care of uh, building the most difficult forms in a much more energy efficient way. Sustainable construction materials, of course, that I've spoken about. Off site, a lot of things that can be made in the factory and brought on site, that can be easily modeled at a different place rather than having to have it constructed on site, is also gaining a lot of popularity. uh, yeah, so these are the few things. Something that is also zero waste kind of products, which we then specifically look for. Some of the carpets that we choose, some of the furniture, some of the ceiling elements, some of the wall finishes that we use for our clients. We also make it a point that they have a cradle to cradle, certification, which means that they are something that is, once they end of life, they're taken back to the factory and they get repurposed and reused and remodeled and remanufactured to form a new product. So that is something that we choose. Yeah, so there's a long list, I would say, but yeah, there is a conscious effort to do all of this. Some of the best practices to achieve the end goal.
Thank you, Sonia, for giving us a brief, a gist of what kind of building materials would help for energy efficient buildings.